Well, hey, I'm glad you're here. I just finished listening to a podcast, and I think it's one that all good time travelers would find interesting. It's about the field of anthropology. Anthropology is the study of human cultures and societies. Anthropologists set out with certain goals, like studying humans both in the past and in the present, organizing what they've discovered, and presenting it in a way that is accessible to others, and applying that knowledge in a way that helps us understand contemporary human culture and behavior. Basically, it's about discovering the origins of humanity and how we grew into this beautifully diverse and amazingly complex global family. It probably seems like I'm wandering off on a tangent here, but it's important to understand a little bit about the field of anthropology when we approach the works of an amazing Harlem Renaissance author named Zora Neale Hurston. In this video, you'll be introduced to Zora Neale Hurston, the author, and to Zora Neale Hurston, the anthropologist. And we'll close out with a preview of your lesson agenda to prepare you for this week's assignments. Let's get started! Gifted novelist, brilliant anthropologist, folklorist, playwright, queen of the Harlem Renaissance, controversial figure, disregarded author, destitute woman buried in an unmarked grave. All of these labels can be used to describe Zora Neale Hurston. Zora Neale Hurston was born in Alabama in 1891. But she was raised in Eatonville, Florida. Eatonville was one of the first all-black towns to be incorporated in the United States. When Hurston was 13, her mother died, and a short time later, her father sent her away from her beloved Eatonville to live with relatives. Her life became increasingly difficult, and at age 16, she joined a traveling theater group. She bounced around for a while and ended up attending Howard University in Washington, D.C. There, she was encouraged to pursue her writing by the great Alain Locke. She published some poems and stories in literary journals, and then moved to New York City. However, Eatonville had shaped her, and no matter where her life took her, Eatonville remained a part of her. Eatonville is found throughout Hurston's fiction. She published a collection of vignettes called the Eatonville Anthology, inspired by Edgar Lee Masters' Spoon River Anthology. She published short stories with names like Sweat and Spunk. In 1937, she published her best-known work, a novel called Their Eyes Were Watching God. These works were filled with characters whose language, personalities, actions, and interactions represented the rich cultural tapestry that Hurston remembered from her Eatonville youth. Unfortunately, not all of her contemporaries saw the value of her work. As a female author, Hurston had to work harder than her male counterparts to gain recognition, and even then, she was paid far less because she was a woman. Being a black woman invited even more obstacles. For example, at a time when American women were celebrating the 19th Amendment, many women of color were still being denied the right to vote. After experiencing some success early in her career, Zora Neale Hurston fell out of favor and ended up dying penniless in Florida and being buried in an unmarked grave. But decades later, she was rediscovered and finally acknowledged as a gifted author who was also a brilliant anthropologist. When Hurston moved to New York, she enrolled in Barnard College to study anthropology. She was drawn to cultural anthropology, which deals with human culture, behavior, and social structures within a particular geographical area. Hurston studied African American and Caribbean folklore and how these folklore traditions contributed to the contemporary black communities that she knew. Hurston was also an ethnographer, someone who studies and records the language, social interactions, and behaviors of particular cultural groups. For this reason, Hurston uses a lot of I dialect in her literary works. We've learned that I dialect can sometimes be used to belittle or disparage certain groups, but Hurston, as an ethnographer, was meticulous about recording the speech sounds and language patterns of her characters as a way to record a piece of cultural history. So this week, in addition to an excerpt from Hurston's classical novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God, you'll read the short story Spunk, and you'll see how Hurston brings a community much like the Eatonville of her childhood to life through language and social context. Prepare yourself. You may need to take your time and read slowly, reread, or even read out loud in order to make sense of the heavy use of I dialect. For example, take a look at the dialogue that introduces the character Spunk. But that's the one thing I likes about Spunk Banks. He ain't scared of nothing on God's green footstool. Nothing. It's not easy for us to decipher, but through the use of I dialect, we understand what language sounded like in Eatonville, Florida, during the early part of the 20th century. We also understand that Spunk is being characterized as someone who's admired for his boldness and fearlessness. We can't talk about Hurston the anthropologist and ethnographer without mentioning her interviews with Cudjoe Lewis, a man who had been captured in West Africa in 1860, decades after the US had banned the importation of enslaved people. Cudjoe and 99 others were forced aboard the slave ship Clotilda and taken to Alabama. 5 years later, when slavery was outlawed in the US, Cudjoe and his fellow Clotilda passengers formed a community called Africatown. There they sought to create a new life while preserving their culture. Hurston interviewed Cudjoe Lewis and recorded his memories and his way of life, and she transcribed his speech with careful I dialect to preserve the words and culture of this unique primary source in a book called Barracoon, The Last Black Cargo. Unfortunately, she couldn't find a publisher, but the manuscript was discovered decades later, and Hurston's book was finally published in 2018, almost 60 years after her death. Okay, we've packed in a lot of information about Zora Neale Hurston, so let's take a look at what's going to be expected of you this week. On days 1 through 4, you'll complete your PDF readings and activities and your daily online practice. You'll be learning a lot about literary analysis during this lesson, and you'll practice sketching outlines as if you're preparing to write a literary analysis essay. Then, on day 5, in addition to answering reflection questions and refreshing those writing skills, you'll use one of the outlines you constructed during the week to write a literary analysis essay that is 4 paragraphs in length, contains between 300 and 500 words, and makes an argument to support something that you've interpreted about one of Hurston's works. You'll wrap it all up with an online assessment, and we'll meet back here next week. Okay, you're ready. Enjoy your time this week with author, anthropologist, ethnographer, folklorist, playwright, and queen of the Harlem Renaissance, Zora Neale Hurston.